Crackhouse audiophile here, telling you how to pimp your Crosley. So this is that's actually a Victrola, but you get the idea. These suitcase record players, the famous one is the Crosley Cruiser. This is a Victrola version. It's they're branded a million different ways, but they're all made in the same factory in China. They're an all-in-one unit. They sound like absolute garbage. And if they look cool though, and people like them. So, number one, don't go out of your way to buy one of these. There are better ways you can spend your money. But if you wind up with one, or you get one for cheap, there are some things that you can do to make them sound a little bit better, and more importantly, to be safe on your records. So, if you're worried about playing your records on one of these, then it's worth making a few little improvements. Now this one's in my son's room. So the reason I did this is because, my son is 7 years old. He doesn't need audiophile quality gear. And I don't even care if he wears out his records. A 7-year-old is probably going to wreck their records anyway. But I want to be able to play my records on this, or let him borrow one of my records and play it. And when I measured the tracking force on this, it was probably around 7 or 8 grams. That's heavy. An LP can take that for, probably several plays, multiple plays. But, I just wanted it a little bit lighter on my LPs. So first thing I did, the back of this, there's no counterweight. So all I did was I took some tire weights and I stuck them on the back here. These black tire weights, you can't even, they come with adhesive. They're made of steel. Each one is a quarter of an ounce. So I stacked 2 on the back there, and it got my tracking weight down to probably 3 3/4 grams, which is, not as light as you would want for a magnetic cartridge, but with a ceramic cart, you probably want it in at around 4 grams. And that's about as close as I could get with those tire weights. So I think it's about 3.8 grams, which is pretty good. Now, the thing that you got to know if you're going to do that, the cartridge that this comes with, which is the red-tipped Chuodenshi, it's built for a heavy tracking force. So when I started playing with this and made the tracking force lighter, the cartridge started skipping like crazy. So backing up, if there's one thing that you can do with this, number one, just change the stylus. The original stylus comes with a ruby cartridge that wears out pretty quickly. And I don't think the sound quality is quite as good. At diamond stylus, diamond tip will play for way longer before wearing out. So that's a cheap improvement you can make. If you want to start messing around with this anymore, this thing, believe it or not, is well engineered, and everything is pretty much built to work together. It's an all-in-one unit. So once you start messing with one setting, you kind of have to compensate in other areas. So with this, when I started adding counterweight to make this lighter tracking, the cart couldn't handle it. It was skipping. So I got this. This is called a Banpa. It's BANPA, and the model is BP2ATC. And this is actually a 33 and 78 flip cart. So you flip that switch, and the stylus turns over, and so it goes from like a 0.7 millimeter LP stylus to the 3 millimeter 78 stylus. So this thing plays. The cool thing about these is that they're 3-speed. They play 33, 45s, and 78s, but most people don't have a proper 78 stylus. And this one, if you have 78s, you can flip it and play them. So anyway, I added some counterweight, and I added this new stylus, and then it wasn't skipping anymore. And it sounds better. It's just a better It's a better cartridge, better pickup than the thing that this comes out of the factory with. So let's see. Number 2, add insulation. This one's optional. These speakers on this thing. Let me drop the needle real quick.
I never lynch, hung with the crews. Love never caught slipping. I knew I had to have none, so I hooked up with my folk.
All right. So you could hear that thing sounds like a clock radio. These I don't even want to call them drivers or woofers. I mean, they're like pretty much tweeters. They're 1.5 inches, and you know, they're not great. They sound about as good as I guess you could expect these tiny speakers to sound, but they don't sound good. And you know, there are things you could probably do to the amplification to make them sound, you know, the bass sound a little bit better, make it sound less like a clock radio. But like I said, a lot of this is done on purpose. This was not engineered to have heavy bass, because once you start adding heavy bass when the speakers are right below the platter, bass will make the needle jump out of the groove and you're going to have skipping. So they purposely made this having, you know, very little bass. So, you know, it's okay. And for, you know, my kid doesn't know the difference. But you know, if you remember what clock radios used to sound like, I mean, that's you're not expecting audiophile sound out of this. So I added polyfill insulation to the inside. I opened it up. It makes maybe an incremental difference. I probably wouldn't have gone to the trouble, but it does make a little bit of difference. It tricks the speakers into thinking that they're in a larger enclosure. But you know, again, there's only so much that you can do with speakers like this. But that's one more thing to try. If you do that, go light on the polyfill, because I went a little heavy at first, and you have to leave room for the there's, you know, damping on this, so you don't want any polyfill pushing up against it. You want to give the platter and everything all of the clearance that it was meant to have from the, you know, when this thing was hollow. So I just have polyfills mostly up in the front around the speakers, just stuffed in there, but don't go too heavy. And again, that's an optional step. It really doesn't make a huge difference. Number 3, I already said, yeah, weight the tone arm. Only do that if you have the Bandpa cart. Don't do that with the Chiwedenchi. It'll just make it skip. Number 4, add external amplification speakers. Now, this one doesn't have Bluetooth out. It has Bluetooth in, so you can play other things through these speakers, but why would you want to do that? I don't know. Like, these speakers are terrible. So this is okay for playing records on the go, but if it's in your house, you're going to want to hook it up to some external amplification and just get away from these speakers altogether. I was messing around, like you can see this realistic one down here. It was actually made to have, this has a phono stage with a ceramic and magnetic switch. You don't need a phono stage, like, or a phono specific input, because it's a ceramic cart. It's a line level output. So that means you can hook this thing up to anything that has an auxiliary input. So that can be, you know, you can get a cheap all-in-one stereo from Goodwill or something, or from a yard sale. The one thing I recommend is, if whatever you have, I ended up going with this little Class D amp. This is a cheap one. The reason I went with this over this one is because it has separate treble and bass settings. So if you have something that does that, that will help compensate for the treble heavy equalization that this thing is built with. Because again, it was built to put sound through these tiny speakers and not create too much vibration. But if you're going to external speakers, that's no longer a problem. So let's drop the needle again. But this time, I'm going to turn this thing on. And let's see how it sounds. All right, so that's better. And now my son can turn it up loud. It's not audiophile quality, but it's a hell of a lot better than what comes out of the tiny speakers. And, you know, it's good. It's not great, and it's not terrible. The thing doesn't skip anymore. It's good stereo separation because you have external speakers. And, you know, hook it up to anything. You could hook it up to just some crappy Iowa all-in-one from the 90s that you get at Salvation Army or something. It'll sound so much better than going through these speakers. So those are your steps. Number one, so let's go for a recap here. Let's see. Number one, change the cartridge and stylus. If you don't want to do all this other crap, at the very least, change that stylus. Order a cheap diamond stylus to get you. Don't use that ruby stylus anymore. Number two, add insulation. That's an optional step. If you insist on using these little internal speakers, the sound will be a little bit better with the insulation. Number three, weight the tone arm only if you do change to that bandpa cartridge. And number four, add external amplification or speakers. Just hook it up to something else. Don't deal with these speakers. Another thing I would add is get yourself like a little brush, good Crackhouse audiophile substitute. I have this soft bristle toothbrush because a kid is going to leave a record on this thing. It doesn't have a dust cover, so when you're turned off, if the kid doesn't put the records away regularly, the records will gather dust. So you want to get, maybe get something like this, cheap one to clean off. Don't buy the one made by Crosley that they sell in the stores for like $40. You should be able to find one of these for like $10 online or less. And get a little brush, because when these records do gather dust and then your kid plays them, the needle is going to collect a bunch of dust. So you just want to get under there with your little needle cleaning brush and just give it a quick, and then that's clean. So I don't know. That's everything. I think again, this is something. This makes it so that you don't have to ruin your records. This is not going to sound audiophile quality, but it does sound better. I hear more detail in the music with the new cart, and I can put my own records on this when I'm goofing around and not worry about wearing them out. So that's it. Have a good one.